you. Good evening and welcome to the Audit Committee. Happy New Year, everybody. Just haven't done that before. And we go to item 1. Oh, sorry. We're going to say who we are. So I'm Councillor Joe Powell and I'm Chairman of Audit Committee.
Thank you. I'm Max Armstrong, so I'm an internal audit manager at BDO, so your new outsourced internal audit providers. I'm responsible for overseeing the delivery of the internal audit plan, reporting to the head of internal audit, and obviously reporting to the committee as well.
I'm also BDO internal audit.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just ask people to speak up? I don't have the best hearing without any microphones and what have you. I'd appreciate it. So I got you and Matt, but I've no idea what you're about.
Hey, Alton.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I too have hearing problems, so good point.
Alton Thomas, Director of Finance, Regulation Enforcement Council, Section 151 Officer.
Councillor Paul Taylor, representing Boninghay and Central.
Councillor Sue Woodward, I'm Leader of the Opposition and I represent Chase Terrace Ward.
Councillor John Smith, Councillor for St John's Ward.
Councillor Jamie Checklands, Lemonsley Ward.
Excuse me, Mark Hooper, I'm Governance Manager and Monitoring Officer.
And I'm Will Stevenson, I am the Principal Governance Officer.
Thank you, and again, welcome everybody.
Well, to invite Zola to introduce
Oh,
himself.
sorry. Do apologise.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Zola?
Yes, thank you. My name is Azola Tutula from the External Auditors. I was going to be joining with Laura, but today she had something that came up, so she couldn't join. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome. In that case, apologies for absence.
Chair, I've had apologies from Councillors Warfield and Marshall.
Thank you. Just to say, I've spoken with Councillor Warfield today, as he's the Deputy Chairman for Audit. He's as well as can be expected, but he's not doing terribly well, if you see what I mean. So we'll leave it with that at the moment. Declarations of interest. Jamie?
Thanks, Chair. Just when we get round to agenda item 5 and we start talking about SIL money, it is one of my pet subjects and I have an application to which my name's attached at the moment. So there's another application in for which I'm chair of the club that's got the application in.
Sounds good to me. Anybody else? In that case, thank you.
But they're governance issues, I think, rather than discussing specific issues in this paper.
I'm sure the officers will guide us as we go along if necessary.
So shut up.
So, minutes of the previous meeting. Gosh, hands up everywhere. I'll start with Councillor Woodward.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just take some advice, please, from the monitoring officer. I just wonder whether there ought to be a record of the previous meeting having been cancelled because of being in quorum. That would sort of complete, if you like, the picture. In fact, this last meeting was cancelled.
Are you saying the last meeting was cancelled and then there was another one which was cancelled, or you're saying the one that was in quorum was cancelled?
No, I'm saying the one that was in quorum was cancelled, and in order to get some completeness in terms of audit trails and so on, it's been advertised. It was advertised on the website and so on. There ought to be some acknowledgement that that meeting failed because of not being quorum.
I'm sure that was done at full council, was it not, Will?
This is the audit committee, though, Chair, and it was this committee meeting that was
certainly make it
cancelled.
Thank you, Chair. Your comments now will give us an excellent opportunity to include it in the minutes and go into the meeting.
That's fine, thank you. I saw Councillor Checkland.
Minutes make reference to SIL money unspent and it will be reviewed. Obviously, our last meeting that we actually held on, and the minutes we're talking about, the 13th of October, some 3 months ago, and I wondered if there's likely to be any update as to that review having taken place.
That would be a question that I'd actually have to throw to Lucy probably at the back.
I'd need to look at the minutes and see what the question was. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that. So,
Okay. And my other one was the LWMTS review made reference to non-executive directors. Has anything happened in relation to this? Is that the appointment of Lizzie Barton, or is it something else? Because that's, as once again, 3 months ago. And does it mean that Alex Farrell is no longer on it?
Well,
My understanding is that yes, Lizzie Barton has now been appointed to that board to replace Councillor Alex Farrell.
That's how it's worked, has it? I saw the announcement that she'd gone on to it, but I didn't see the announcement that he'd come off it. So.
Yeah, through your chair, there was a cabinet member decision whereby Councillor Smith appointed Lizzie Barton as shareholder, and in that report it mentioned the resignation of Councillor Farrell.
Right, appointed her as the director.
Yes.
Well, the shareholder.
Yeah, the shareholder approves the appointment. So,
right, because shareholders comes up later on, doesn't it? And, agenda 6. I think. No. Page 96 and anyway. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, sorry, to carry on from that to the substantive point then, I did note the cabinet meeting minutes where Lizzie Barton was appointed, and there is still no reference at all to non-executive directors. Yeah, it's a hobby horse of mine. I've brought it up several times. We should be looking at least 2, probably 3 non-executive directors with industry knowledge for the different parts of industry that LWMTS is involved with. We've moved partway down the road that we were taking with the we're starting to formulate the shareholders board, but we're still missing that crucial element of non-executive directors with industry experience.
I think you're quite right in that. I think it's probably a point that should be carried forward. Anthony.
Councillor Powell, I just wondered if Kerry was able to give an update as she's a board member.
I was just going
to point
coming to you.
I am aware that a recruitment search has started. I think, as you'll be aware, LWM has a talent acquisition service, so that is being tasked with doing active recruitment for non-executive directors. I don't think we've at the point of actually having a short list of candidates, but I do know that the talent acquisition search has started.
If I may, through you, Chair, is that for 1 non-exec, 2, 3, with specific industry knowledge in the sectors that LWMTS is active in?
Yes, there's definitely a short list that's been put forward in terms of the types of skills. I think we've been open in terms of the number of candidates, because again, it's about finding the right people to come on the board with those skills. So if it's 1, 2 or 3, it's whoever comes forward that we feel is the right skills. As far as I know, that's where we're up to in terms of the process.
Well, it seems a reasonable answer. Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Chair, it's stretching your patience a little bit, but in view of the fact we've been talking about non-executive directors and skills acquisition and so on, the independent member of this committee was appointed before Christmas. Has he sent apologies, or was he invited to this meeting?
Certainly invited to this meeting.
I haven't received apologies myself. I don't know if another officer has, however.
Chair, I recollect that the first meeting he was invited to is the February meeting, because this is the adjourned December meeting.
Right, okay. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, and we look forward to welcoming him to meet us all. Councillor Stratton.
Chair, on a point of information on the issue of LWM traded services, and to answer Councillor Checkland's point, Councillor Farrell resigned as the director on the 27th of November last year, and that is recorded at Companies House. The filing is up to date.
So much. Think anything else from the minutes? No, in that case, can we take it as accepted? Thank you. Right. So we have the UK item 4 UK SPF reallocations. Relocations. Well,
This is a report from C and Kerry. If you don't want them to table chair.
please do come.
Just needs. There.
Why bird?
Are we going to use the?
Item 3.3, it says we received £400,000 from DEFRA. Year one was 100,000 and year two was 200,000. Do we have a third tranche still to come, or is one of those figures wrong?
Are you going back to the minutes there?
No. Item 3.3 on item 4.
Oh, sorry. Yes, yes. I don't know. We will ask.
Let's open the paper first.
I would say the first probably typo's been found, because that should definitely add up to 400,000. We've definitely had all the money, so I think it should be 2 lots of 200,000.
Oh.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you for that. Good. Okay, go for it.
Would you like me to give the committee just a brief summary, and then we can open up to questions? So the committee asked for a report on a UK Shared Prosperity Fund 2022 to 2025. During that period, Lichfield District Council was allocated just under 3.3 million in UK SPF and 400k of rural England prosperity funding. The paper outlines the internal and external governance processes that were in place for overseeing the spend and delivery of the projects. Just some key points from the paper that I just draw out for the committee's attention. All funds were fully spent by 31st of March 2025 in line with government requirements. All required returns to central government were signed off by the Section 151 officer, submitted on time, and no issues were raised by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, which is the government department that administered the grants. The original investment plan was formally signed off by central government in December 2022. At that time of pulling together that investment plan, government guidance was that detailed project plans weren't required at that stage. Instead, UK SPF was a delegated fund to support local authorities to invest in local priorities. Once projects had been scoped and planned, they did not always prove viable within the time periods or within the original allocated amounts. So changes to the scopes of projects and any allocations were all discussed and approved by the UK SPF project board as required. All changes were made in line with our internal approved financial regulations and also within the UK SPF guidelines set out by MHCLG, and obviously also approved through our regular reporting to them as well. And just for added kind of reassurance in terms of governance, as part of their annual audit of accounts and value for money assessment, the external auditors reviewed the council's financial statements and supporting information, including UK SPF, to provide an independent opinion on their accuracy and reliability, and no issues were raised. So those are just some key points. See, there's more detail in the paper, and obviously open for any questions.
Thank you very much. As always, to the point. Any questions, folks? Yes, Councillor Woodward.
Thanks, Chair. Really, this paper is about governance, and I think a number of us, including Councillor Checkland, have raised issues about governance and certainly transparency and accountability. What worries me about UK SPF funds and also about the still funding is the lack of member involvement. I know we've got a project board and there's an officer board, but I don't think there are other members directly involved. And it does seem to be the case that this is a movable feast. It's sort of whatever we can spend it on, we'll spend it on. And I understand the need for that sort of pragmatism, but we as members, we don't get to see how these are allocated. Then when we go to the details, So, for example, if I look at the under 3.10, allocations that were made to Burntwood, for example, and I've said I'm a Chase Terrace councillor, so I'm interested in what comes into Burntwood, have been cut short and then reallocated to the leisure centre, for example. And that doesn't sit well, in my view, in terms of equitable funding across the district. So I'd like, first of all, to know who the members of the project board are, whether there is any other additional member oversight apart from Councillor Sylvester Hall as the chair, and who makes these decisions about the reallocation, and is there any consideration about the areas requiring funding? And the same question will arise on the SIL report, I'm afraid, afterwards. Thanks, Chair.
So, as you said, Councillor Woodward, the project board was chaired by the cabinet member for visitor economy, ecology and climate change. As far as I'm aware, there are no other councillors that are involved in the project board.
So it's completely an officer board apart from Councillor Sylvester Hall?
Yes.
That concerns me even more. I have to say that it's one member, one cabinet member involved in these allocations. We don't get any information to the scrutiny committee, for example. It's not shared amongst other cabinet members, and it just seems to me a little bit thin in terms of the overall transparency and accountability, and I think that's something that could be easily addressed, really, in terms of the project board. And then the second question about the are areas considered in terms of reallocation of funding. There's a huge amount of money that's gone into Lichfield City to the detriment of Burntwood, for example.
So that was most definitely considered throughout the life of the project board. So, for example, in terms of some of the reallocations around Burntwood, what we made sure is that even though some of the UK SPF money wasn't fully spent in Burntwood as we originally envisaged, we did make sure other capital monies from the wider budget were allocated to make sure that that overall total that we envisaged at the start of the investment plan did still get allocated. Obviously, with UK SPF, we did have time constraints, which in terms of project viability did have an impact. But in terms of the Burntwood allocation, we did make sure via the broader budget that original intention in terms of that level of funding still was allocated, just from a different source.
I think I've made the point, perhaps slightly subtly, but when members, particularly, I'm thinking about Burntwood members, but it might apply to people from the rural areas as well. When members see that originally 250,000 was allocated to a community hub in Burntwood and 166 has been spent, where's that extra almost £100,000 gone, which was, if you like, allocated to Burntwood? We need to see more equitable funding across the whole district, I think, rather than what we're seeing at the moment.
If I could just add, although it was 166, 364, it does actually say in the notes that we did actually put further council resources, so the full 250 was spent within Burntwood on the incubator space. So we were conscious that we didn't want to underspend on that.
The incubator space is not the same as a community hub. That's got to be said. An incubator space is something really quite different. And while it was, yes, it was expedient, it was pragmatic, it was the thing to do so that some money got spent there at the leisure centre, we didn't get the community hub that we'd been promised since 1999, would it be? So, I just want to flag this up, that, we keep getting promises about investment in the infrastructure in Burntwood, but there's no delivery. We don't see it happening. I think I've made the point, Chair, so I'll leave it at that.
Yes, indeed, Councillor Woodward, and I have to say, since I've been on the council, which is slightly less than yourself, but not a lot less, exactly the same as you just said. So yeah, I agree with you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm going to come to the same subject, I'm afraid, but I think it's indicative of the overall management. There was an issue. The £250,000 for the Burntwood community hub was, as in the notes, was sought for a specific project which, for various reasons, wasn't feasible. Who took the decision and when was that decision taken to reallocate that money to incubator spaces at the leisure centre? Was that the cabinet member? Was that the board? Or was it board prompted by the cabinet member? And I ask because Burntwood members were raising the fact that this had not been spent quite some time ago. And we've spent £245,000 on the incubator spaces. Now, the only reason I can see that we would have to have done £78,000 of that from council funds is because we didn't manage to get the full 245,000 spent before the 31st of March. Because if we'd spent it before the 31st of March, it would all have come out of UK SPF. Therefore, we had to take 80,000 from UK SPF and spend it on something else, probably the leisure centre, because that's the only one where it goes the other way, so that we could then spend £80,000 of council money in Burntwood in order to make up the almost £250,000. Now, that to me is a timing issue, and that could have been avoided if somebody had said within a decent amount of time, it looks like we're not going to be able to do this project that it was for. We need to find something. And it always felt that decision hadn't been taken in time. And I asked questions of the cabinet member in council repeatedly, is this going to be spent in time? And I was assured it was, and I've been assured in this meeting that it was, and it looks like it wasn't. We had to spend it somewhere else and make it up out of council funds. That's not the answer I got. And so I wonder, where did that decision come from? Was that a board decision to reallocate this to a different project? Who identified that this wasn't going to be spent in time? Or was that at the cabinet member? Was it down to the cabinet member to make that decision? And so whose delay is that?
Just as a point of information, I was informed as the leader of the opposition that it wasn't going to be spent on the community hub, and rather than lose the money, it had got to be spent elsewhere. I can't remember the details of when that was, but just as a point of information.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that decision. I mean, that for me, that's a good decision that 250 still gets spent in Burntwood. Whether it's a community hub or not, whether we could have spent it on a community hub, I don't know, because it's a difficult point in Burntwood, and I know the details, and we're getting outside of control, and this is down to political decisions, and that's not what I'm questioning. I'm not questioning the political decision to do that. I'm questioning the way in that which that decision was made. That meant we were 80 grand underspent and had to quickly rearrange some money so that we still end up spending it. But also, kind of, why was I then told it had all been spent in Burntwood when it hadn't, and we had to do some rearranging? Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Thank you, Councillor Woodward, for your information, ladies.
Yeah, because I'm a member of the project board, so from my experience, we have set out as a summary here what happened with the original allocation, and it was the Oak Pub at Sankey's Corner, and that was going to cost £1 million plus, and it just wasn't financially viable. So then there was so much effort to try and secure another building. Officers, we were working to try and get a property for Burntwood because that's what we wanted. That was our intention. So as we set out in the report, we explored other buildings. It's not that didn't happen, because every meeting we were pressing for the property team to find another building. Those negotiations took place, and for one reason or another, they weren't viable, or it just didn't go through. Then there was a Methodist church that was bought by the town council.
Oh, but hang on, there was never a bid from the district council to buy the Methodist church.
Well, I
never
can't.
a bid.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't party to those, obviously, negotiations, but from my memory on being on the board, that it was seen as an opportunity, and I don't know.
It was an opportunity, but it was an opportunity taken up by the town council rather than the district council.
So maybe then it was an opportunity for literally, again, I'm not sure at the exact timeline, but then we were trying to secure the Citizens Advice Burntwood office, And that would have been a fantastic opportunity. And there were lots of negotiations, and for one reason or another, that didn't happen. So then the idea for the incubator space came up so that we could spend some money in Burntwood. And the contractors we went through a tender process, and unfortunately the contractors just couldn't get the work to finish it in time for the end of March, and that's why that reallocation. But originally, when it went out to tender, it should have been finished by the end of March, and because of the UK SPF rules, if it's not spent within the financial year, then we can't obviously count it. So we took the decision, well, let's find some money from the next year so that we can spend that full 250. So that was really only because the work took longer than anticipated. But that was the only reason why. Otherwise, we'd much prefer to spend the 250 within the financial year. So,
Councillor Checkland, you were indicating?
Oh, not specifically. I can see the maths behind the movement of money, so that you're spending the money within the allocated time, and I've heard the explanation there, which sounds quite reasonable. The contractor, these things aim at a deadline, but they rarely reach them on time, so you have to manage stuff. I'll be interested to know how much the Methodist Church actually sold for. If it was discussed but outside the 250,000 remit, which I suspect it might have been, I can understand why the district council wasn't able to move forward on that, because there was 250,000 offered forward there. So it all sounds very complicated. The feasibility of study of, yes, it's going to be over 1 million and we've got 250,000, that does tend to rule something out as well. So from a practical point of view, I can see all sides, and I can understand Burntwood's frustration of still wanting something there. Just to come back to something Councillor Woodward said, that it's Burntwood money being spent on a Lichfield facility. There is an argument in relation to the medical centre from SIL money, that's a medical centre of £1 point something million set aside from SIL money that's come from building around Lichfield. So there's
still.
If in fact the Burntwood Centre gets round to being built with the money from the SIL, which we'll come on to later.
Yeah. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah. I wouldn't start to go down the point of adding up monies, because I know which way that's going to lean in the end, and I don't think it's going to. I don't think that's going to result in any strength to your argument there. But yeah, no, I'm not questioning the amount of money spent. We've got 245,000 spent in Burntwood in the end, and I'm not questioning the decision to do that. We wanted to get this UK SPF money spent, so we didn't have to return any of it. And the fact that we've done this reallocation at the end of the year, great, superb, fantastic. We get all of that money spent in the district. There is a history in this council of us in council agreeing to spend monies in a certain way, and it's not getting spent in the period in a reasonable period of time. We've still got budget allocations from stuff 2 years ago that hasn't been spent. And as I say, in council, I specifically called this amount out as potentially not being spent on time. And the explanation I've been given is great. It is not the explanation. It is not the answer I got in council. If you go back on the records, never have we been given that explanation, and it's slightly different to the explanations that we were given, which is, there's no reason why that full story could not have been given in council, and it's just, it feels wrong now that it wasn't. And that makes me question the validity of answers that we're getting in council. The story to this specific amount is different to the story we have been given. And that's what we as a committee are here to root out, to uncover. And if that is different, that is concerning. Because for me, the explanation we've just been given, perfect. Okay, I get it. If that decision was made late because we were chasing better opportunities, fantastic, absolutely brilliant. That is what I would expect our officers to do. But that is not the explanation I was given at any point until now. And that concerns me.
See that it would, and yes, it's a pity we can't have the sort of answers we've had tonight given when they're asked in council. There we go.
Or corrected immediately afterwards, Chair. You know, I mean, in the heat of full council, I can understand that a cabinet member might sort of give a knee-jerk reaction to a question, but when that's found to be untrue, then an explanation should be sent out as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, full council can be at times combative because it is political in nature, and my questions were rooted in trying to find issues that should be addressed, and so I can understand why a specific answer might be given, but if that turns out not to have been a correction, should have been issued.
In that case, what we're really saying is that the members of the cabinet need to be better informed or more forthcoming with the answers they do have. Yes, Councillor.
Chairman, I think you make a very good point there, and I think we as an audit committee could recommend to cabinet members that where they're shown to have given perhaps not the full answer or a slightly incorrect answer, they should be directed to report to members as soon as possible afterwards, so that we have got the full sort of accountability and transparency, and that sort of audit trail is followed through. It's too easy to say, yeah, well, that was then, and I've found out since that things are different. But it's about the record, the correct record. So I think you make a good point, and I would move that we, as an audit committee, recommend that cabinet members do review answers they've given to questions at full council to ensure that they are correct.
Yeah, because there's nothing to stop them from saying we will find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not, John? You look amused.
No, I was merely adjusting my collar.
Very good. Right, ladies, any more? You done?
I mean, is that proposal agreed by?
Anthony was just indicating, just get them in first.
All I was going to say was that in the provisional finance settlement, there is no more UK SPF money being allocated. So this is it now. So this is basically lessons learned from this that we'd apply, I suppose, in similar circumstances going forward.
Thank you very much. Do we need a vote on this, folks?
Ideally, you should have a vote. Obviously, it couldn't be a formal recommendation because you're putting it onto cabinet, but you could make a suggestion to them. Absolutely.
Okay, I'll move that as a formal recommendation.
I'll second.
Sorry.
I can just tell Will again what it was you.
It couldn't be a formal recommendation to cabinet. It would be a suggestion of action they take.
Okay, well, the suggestion made to cabinet members that if they've given a response at full council that turns out subsequently not to be entirely accurate, then they review their answers as soon as possible after the minutes are published and ensure that members generally are told what the correct position is.
And you're still seconding, Councillor?
I'll second that, yeah.
Very good. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Good. Thank you. Thank you for your reports, ladies. Appreciate it. Item 5, governance and project management of community infrastructure levy. Yourselves again?
I'm afraid it is, Chair. So again, Chair, would you like me just to do a quick summary? Fabulous. So the committee asked for this report on the governance process for allocating community infrastructure levy. commonly called SIL. SIL is a charge on developments intended to provide a funding stream for the infrastructure needed to support the policies and proposals in a council's adopted local plan. It is supposed to fund the provision of a range of infrastructure needed to support growth in the district. However, SIL funding alone is rarely sufficient to fully finance infrastructure projects. The council adopted its SIL charging schedule back in 2016. The amount of SIL liable depends on where the development is in the district, the type of use, amount of floor space, so various different criteria that lead to the SIL charge. Rate of SIL payable is mandatory and non-negotiable. The council has in place approved governance and administration procedures for SIL. It's allocating and spending SIL guidance. These were last updated and approved by Cabinet back in March 2024. So each year the council publishes an infrastructure funding statement which details the amount of SIL and Section 106 monies received and spent by the council in the financial year. The funding statement also contains the infrastructure list that outlines the strategic infrastructure projects that the council considers eligible for strategic SIL funding applications for that financial year. The infrastructure list is informed by the infrastructure delivery plan, which is a key supporting document of the local plan itself, and our Lichfield District 2050 strategy, as well as input from the strategic infrastructure group, councillors and infrastructure delivery bodies. That infrastructure list is reviewed and approved by Cabinet each year as part of the infrastructure funding statement, and an annual SIL funding round takes place in accordance with our governance and administrative procedures. Applications are invited and scored and moderated by a subgroup of the strategic infrastructure group of officers. The proposed awards are then ratified by that officer group before being considered by Cabinet for approval. Once Cabinet have approved the SIL allocations for that funding round, grant agreements are then put in place, and those grant agreements include outcomes that need to be delivered and stage payments which are linked to the achievement of various milestones that are set out in that agreement. Where planning permission is needed, no monies are released until with grant recipients on a regular basis to monitor progress. So that's just a brief summary of the governance process for SIL.
Okay. Any questions, folks? Councillor,
I'll just repeat the same point about, the lack of visibility for backbench members of the discussions and negotiations that go on at the SIG. I remember years ago there used to be members at the part of that SIG group or whatever it was called at that point, but we don't get to see that until we see the Cabinet reports and the outcomes. So it would be good if members were able to influence what's going on, so that it is genuinely transparent and about infrastructure across the district rather than political priorities. I think the SIL list this year is sort of quite wide, but a couple of years ago it was all into leisure because of the issues around Friary Grange and the new leisure centre, and that seemed to me to be too overtly political a decision around SIL rather than about, the general infrastructure. So, can we get more transparency and visibility for backbench members on the way the SIL list is discussed, negotiated, brought forward?
thank you. Councillor Check.
Two from me, please. Under legal implications, it says that the IFS no later than the 31st of December of presumably of this year. Has that happened? And it mentioned that it had to be approved by the Cabinet as well prior to going to that. So have things been approved by Cabinet and gone?
It's been approved, yes, and it's on our website.
And my other one was, from memory, The Burntwood Leisure Centre, when was that approved for SIL? Was that 2 years ago?
It's the previous funding round.
Sorry?
It's the previous funding round. 'Cause
Yeah, but there wasn't one last year, was there?
it's for the last allocation that we did.
So it's 2 years ago.
It was last year's money. Yeah.
So, sorry,
Yeah.
Councillor Chairman, you mean the health centre?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, so that was,
Because there wasn't a SIL application round in 24.
It was allocated in February 25.
getting my years
So,
mixed up.
yeah, so it was financial year 24-25, and now this current funding round is 25-26.
No, there was 1 year that was missed. I just wondered whether it was 12 months left.
It might have just been slightly late. We've never missed a year. But it might, it's not, it might be 13 months, you know, it might not be definitely every 12 months, but there's definitely one every year, every financial year. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucy. Anybody else? No, in that case, I can think we vote, don't we? Yep. Yeah. Can I have somebody move the acceptance of this? Councillor Taylor, seconder, please. Councillor Checkland, all in favour? Unanimously. Very good. Excellent. Right. So, number 6. Treasury management.
Yeah. So just for the committee's benefit, so we do 3 reports to the audit committee on treasury management. We do a strategy report in February each year, which sets out what we plan to do for the forthcoming financial year. We do a mid-year report around November, which is this one, which looks at how we're doing compared to the strategy. And then we do an annual report to the committee around July, which says, did we achieve the objectives we set out? Were there any breaches or any issues we need to raise with the committee that took place during that year? So this report overviews in-year performance compared to the strategy for capital expenditure, funding, borrowing, investments, cap receipts and service investments, which for this council is the cinema. Just the key highlights or the key points I wanted to make to the committee. So capital expenditure is projected to be £6.89 million lower than the budget, mainly due to updating the spend profile for the cinema project, the primary healthcare facility in Burntwood, Street A Community Centre, the Burntwood Master Plan. Capital receipts are projected to be higher than budget, again due to receiving a share of right to buy receipts from the Housing Association. The use of that additional funding is something we'll be considering in the MTFS that comes forward in the next few months. Because we spent less, we don't need to borrow as much as we planned, but we always try and delay borrowing need to as late as possible in the project to reduce the impact on the revenue budget. Again, because we've spent less, investments are higher than projected. That means we're generating additional investment income for the council. And I can't remember how long ago it was. It was about, let's say, a year ago. We brought a paper to the audit committee, or the audit member standards committee as it was, around reducing the exposure to strategic or pooled investments, and we were looking at reducing by 5 million from 14 million to 9 million. That wasn't in a set time period. It was when timing presented. So we had one that we've now multi-asset fund for a loss of 187,000. But when we set these reserves up, we set a reserve aside to cover that risk, and we'd set £205,000 aside to cover a loss on that underperforming assets. So that doesn't affect the council's budgets or finances in any way. That's all I wanted to say, but I'm quite happy to take questions from members.
Questions, folks? Councillor Taylor.
In terms of our investments, how granular is our ability to choose what our investments are in? Because I know we don't directly invest in companies, but we invest in funds. And obviously, you can't avoid the speculation that AI investments are potentially on the edge of a bubble with a big burst. Are we therefore in a position to look at our funds and say we would like not to be in funds that are heavily invested in that type of investment? And if so, have we taken that sort of decision, or is all of that out of our hands?
So, Chair, we can probably set any criteria we like. But what I would say is that the funds that we do invest in are recommended by Arlen Close, the Treasury advisors, the specialists. I can't say, hand on heart, that we've looked at that level of detail in terms of where they're invested at the moment. But I suppose the advantage with the multi-asset funds is you are investing over a broad spectrum of asset classes, which means you are spreading risk and you're not overly exposed to one sector or asset, which you might be if you went directly into one of those companies that was now. So I can't say this hand on heart, but I would imagine that Arlen Close keep that under review and wouldn't recommend a fund that they have concerns about in terms of bubbles or over risk.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, can I go to page 35, please, Chair, and look at the risk profile at the bottom of the page there. Those three risks, GHI, they're all likelihood yellow, impact yellow, severity of risk yellow, which doesn't give me a great deal of comfort. So if Anthony can give some comfort, that would be helpful.
Is these the risks that are GH and I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with some of these risks, they're quite high level. So I mean, you've picked out we can't achieve the delivery plan or impact on the strategic plan of resourcing and government. Some of these are risks that we highlight, but we have. I mean, if I take we can only do a watching brief on that. So the ability to influence the risk through a mitigation process is quite limited on some of these. But and I'll be honest, some of the scoring that is used can be quite subjective at times. So they're there just to flag to the committee and over in scrutiny and cabinet where these reports also go that there is a risk there. We are planning to monitor it, but you know, in some cases, all we can do is a watching brief. We try and influence policy decisions through always responding to consultations and things like that. But you know, one council, its ability to influence a government approach is quite limited in there. But I do think it's quite important that we give our voice and give our view in those situations. Some of the other ones, like we can't achieve the delivery plan. Yes, we can influence. We can change the delivery plan if the resourcing doesn't fit it. We can make resources available if risks change, for instance. So we don't need an earmark reserve of one form or another. We can make that available for investment. So we do have some influence on some of the risks on here.
That's a check.
Just an observation really in relation to 1.9 and the fact you were aiming to get an A- Treasury investment score, and we just wanted to compliment you on the fact you got an A+. So yes, you've aimed high and reached a little bit higher, and that's quite reassuring because I assume you don't assess yourself on an A+, someone else does that.
So the A- is a recommendation that Arlen Close make in terms of where we should be aiming. I think they will always try and give advice that gets you above that. And obviously, if you invest more with central government, you will get higher than that. But I think our primary responsibility with investments is security, so the return of the capital. We don't go out looking for high returns that are high risk.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I did have one other question, just to, because I don't know. Does the right to buy apply to all social housing or just council-owned social housing? Does it apply to every social housing supplier?
No, so this is a particular agreement we had in place when we sold the housing stock to.
Litchfield District.
Yes, no, I lose track of who it is now, but Bromford as it was. Those houses we transferred, if they sell them, we get a share of those. So any that they've built subsequent, we don't, and any other social housing provider, we don't get a share of.
That's what prompted my question, really, because I wonder whether everyone had the same restrictions that councils have on them. But do they still need to sell them? The request is put in is what I'm on about, rather than in the stock.
As I understand it, if they get a request under a right to buy route, they have to follow that legal route. They'll have built houses subsequent to that I don't think would through the right to buy legislation. But ours are the ones that transferred back in 1997 that we get a share of.
On a point of clarification, the right to buy does extend to registered housing associations who are registered with Homes England, and I believe has done since the Housing Act 1985 was enacted, which followed through the legislation that did this.
Right, thank you.
Changes are proposed, though. I believe changes are in the pipeline.
Yeah,
and it's been abolished in Scotland and Wales, I understand.
Completely irrelevant to this then, Chair. If I can recommend people listen to the Radio 4 podcasts in relation to Housing Britain. There's 3 episodes on there. They're very interesting listening. I'm sure you find it very, if you haven't already listened to them, but it makes reference to housing stock and problems there are now and how to move forward. Just an advert for BBC, for Radio 4, sorry.
All information's good information. Thank you. That it? Very good. Can you work on that? That's lovely. In that case, I'll say thank you ever so much. It's interesting. Enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for the questions too. They were good. Okay, in that case, we go to item 7, the internal audit progress report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a long report. I'll start by saying 4 different appendices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the 4 appendices separately, pause for questions in between, because otherwise there's a risk that we kind of lose information if we did it all in one go. I'm going to start unusually on appendices 4, which is our internal audit charter. That's on page 124 of your packs. An internal audit charter. So as there has been a material change in the nature of the internal audit service, BDO have come in as an outsourced provider, whereas you had in-house provision before. We are required by the global internal audit standards to present and request approval of our audit charter from the committee. This document essentially sets out the purpose and the mandate of our role as internal audit. It's a fairly long document. I won't go through each bullet point individually, but the key points to bring out here for this committee is it identifies the roles and responsibilities of us as internal audit providers, the responsibilities of the council, this committee and management, responding to internal audit and engaging with internal audit. And there are some key differences that you will note. There's not too many differences, but there are some key differences you'll note around the service and what you see compared to what you had before. Just to draw on those, so we were the co-source providers working with the internal audit team since 2022-23. So there is a clear sort of smooth transition, smooth handover, and there will be continuity. The key differences you will see, and you'll see in this report, are 2 things. So 1, the templates. So all of our progress reports, follow-up reports now brought onto the BDO templates. Content is very, very similar to what you had before. It's just the style slightly different. The key change that you will note is our opinion indicators. So what you had before was 1 opinion for each report. So it's on a scale of no assurance to substantial assurance. What we do, and is standard practice across all of our local authority clients, is to have a 2 opinion scale. So we have control design, which is our evaluation of the design controls, how well they're set up, policies and procedures in place to support effective management of those controls, and then control effectiveness, essentially how well are those controls followed, is there consistency in how they're followed. The scales are similar, so no assurance, limited, moderate and substantial, but you'll get 2 opinions. So what you'll see in this report as we go through There are some that are under the old opinion. So you've got one block opinion, and there are some that have two opinions under our methodology. There are, and that's purely a timing matter. So we became the internal audit providers from October 2025. So some reviews started and were completed before that date. As I say, we are requesting the committee's approval of this paper. So I don't know if we want to pause there before we move on to the rest of the progress report, Chair.
Well, probably a good idea. In that case, any questions?
I'll just make a comment. We've always had a good relationship with our internal audit manager, so no pressure, Max, but expectations are high.
We hope to continue that definitely over the coming years.
What's that? Councillor Taylor.
I'll recommend approval then. I'll move.
Seconded, please. Thanks. Councillor Woodward, all in favour? Unanimous.
Thank you, Chair. So the next report I'm going to move back to is Appendix 1, which is our progress report. This essentially provides a summary of the progress we've made in the plan for the year. So that starts on page 44 of your packs. And then also there's executive summaries of individual audits. There's quite a lot for this committee because there has been quite a big gap since the previous committee. So for the benefit of time, we're going to take the paper as read and give brief summaries and invite any questions. So I'll bring my colleague Faye, who will go through the first three. We'll pause for questions, and then I'll present the other three.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year, first of all. So firstly, I'll draw your attention to the progress completion table on page 46. So this shows that we've completed 8 of the 15 audits, and we have all of the others due to be completed by the end of the financial year. So we've scoped those, scheduled them in to be completed. And the only disclaimer to that is that the payroll audit has been scheduled slightly later just because of some changes. So that one could potentially be pushed back a little bit. So you'll see that we're bringing 6 reports to this committee. And as you'll see in that table, one of those has the 2 different opinions that Max has just mentioned. That's the VAT report. So that is because it was completed after we moved to outsource. So that's quite a good example of how the different opinions have been shown. So what I'll do is present the first 3 reports and then pause for questions, just so that it's not too much information all at once. And then Max will present the second. Given the size of the report pack as well this evening, I'll discuss the findings and recommendations. However, I do want to note that there is good practice outlined within each section for each audit, but for the interest of time, we'll move on from that one. So firstly, the business continuity audit received a limited opinion, meaning that there's some room for improvement. We gave a high and 2 medium findings, and business continuity is a key risk. Therefore, preparedness for any type of disaster, weather, loss of buildings, cyber attacks, that kind of thing is vital. These findings relate to both the corporate business continuity plan, which focuses on the arrangements for the council as a whole, and service level plans being either outdated or incomplete. The recommendations have all been well received and accepted by management though, and are due to be complete. The second report is the VAT report, which received moderate assurance for both design and effectiveness of controls, which is more towards the positive spectrum of the assurance. There are some improvement areas from medium recommendations that we've offered. These include the VAT manual not having a formal review period and there being a lack of training for staff. This is important to ensure the team remain up to date with all of the VAT requirements. There's also not a business continuity plan for VAT, meaning there's not a plan to manage VAT requirements in the event of a disaster or continuity incident. Finally, partial exemption monitoring procedures have not been updated for some years and don't include a clear process to monitor the limit. And again, all recommendations have been accepted by management for this report. The last report that I'll talk to you about is local and 5-year land supply. So ending on a high note for this one, it received a substantial assurance with only one low recommendation relating to the level of detail that should be included within leadership meetings minutes in order to demonstrate adequate oversight. So I'll open for questions here.
Councillor?
VAT is my wheelhouse. I've not done anything else in my career but VAT since leaving sixth form. So yeah, I mean the first two findings of concern, fairly standard, just out of date documentation stuff. Obviously doesn't necessarily present an issue until something changes or something happens. The third one, however, partial exemption, that concerns me, because obviously partial exemption is one of the most complex areas of VAT, particularly for public bodies. Is that just partial exemption you're talking about, or is that partial exemption and your non-business restrictions?
We were referring just to partial exemption, and the details of the finding really relate to the lack of evidence to support it. So monitoring of the limit, we were told during the audit, does happen. It's just there wasn't supporting evidence to show that happens. So we can't report that that is happening on an ongoing basis if we can't see the supporting evidence of that.
Okay, so that's a little less concerning. Sorry, go on.
So I was just going to add to that, because it does sit under me, this area, that the risk around partial exemption has reduced significantly from what it used to be. The biggest risk area used to be leisure services. So a lot of the income that you used to receive was exempt for courses and training and things like that. There's been a couple of legal cases where that treatment has changed to, I think, non-business. So that no longer has to form part of the monitoring regime. We would have probably had difficulties building a brand new leisure centre if leisure was still an exempt supply. But as I say, the risk has reduced significantly. So we accept the recommendation, but it's not as critical as it perhaps was 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay. You? Yeah, no, that covers it, I think.
Woodward?
Yeah, can I go back to the business continuity plans, page 49 specifically? As councillors, you know, things are operating well, we tend not to question them, but areas of concern there. 14 of the 29 service areas have not completed their local business continuity plan, which is a very high number, it seems to me. On the next page, it says the management response is that the corporate business continuity plan will be updated by the 31st of December 25. Was it, and how's progress looking? And it's not very long since the 31st of December, but is the progress being made?
So I can pick up that briefly. I will, and if it's okay, invite you to answer the second part. So the council have a corporate business plan and then service business plans for how each service will respond. So I suppose to an extent our review is done at a certain point in time. This report I think was finalised in mid-November. The next part of our process, which you'll see in the following report, is our follow-up process. So we do follow up on those recommendations as they fall due, but on a quarterly basis. So unfortunately, I can't give you the answer of progress since the 31st of December. We haven't done that follow-up process yet for this. That's right, yeah. I wasn't thinking about this on New Year's Day. And so I don't know if you want to give an update on the progress of that from a management perspective.
So leadership team instructed at one of the wider leadership team meetings where all the managers that are responsible for these attend, that they had to be completed for their area by, I believe it was the end of November. That would then enable the corporate to be updated based on those. I can't hand on heart say in this meeting that has all been done and just been reviewed. I'm going to have to find that out. But it will definitely be picked up at a future leadership team because it was an instruction given by leadership team, but mainly by the chief executive.
Okay, and then we'll get to the report at the next audit committee meeting, presumably, yeah.
Yes, so if
Let's contain our excitement, won't we?
so BDO will do a follow-up review to see whether we did do what we said we were going to do by the deadline we said.
I mean, if we could have an interim response, Chair, that would be helpful, because it's there are quite significant gaps between audit committee meetings. So if we could get some assurance in the meantime, that would be really helpful, I think.
I'm sure we could do that, couldn't we? Yeah.
Thanks.
Declan.
Observation in relation to the way in which the report is set out for me. From page 46, I got R, L, S and M. I had those down as regular, long, small and medium because I thought I was talking about trousers. As I got through the report, I got words to them, which was limited, moderate, substantial and reasonable. So from page 46, I have to wait to page 70 before you tell me what you're talking about. So it would be quite handy to have had the index, what we're measuring at the beginning. So this, I now know I'm not talking about trousers. But
If I could just go on that point, so on page 44 of your pack, you can see about halfway down the page there's 2 bullet points.
Is there another one on there?
It would signpost you to appendix 1 and 2 of this report, which does have a full list of those definitions. I suppose we style it in that way because we put the meat first, so to speak, and then the definitions towards the end. But it is signposted in page 44 of your packs.
Yeah, nevertheless, I still think it might be an idea it more clearly, other than going to an appendix and that, if you could do something about that, please.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm with Jamie, absolutely.
It's just an observation. Usually I thought they can't be talking about trousers.
I was. I didn't even think of them talking about trousers, but I tried to interpret it and was wrong, and then found out later on. But yeah, it would be useful just to have a look.
Think points that have fallen in this section because we've covered all. Because I've gone through these in your that we are, and now I've got page numbers next to some of my queries rather than knowing which particular section it's in. It mentioned page 69. Is this in the right section? I think it is.
I'll put on to that after. So if we hold that one for a few minutes.
We're not on 69.
59.
On 69 then?
Yeah, correct, yeah.
No, the next one's on 70.
Back to page 4. How often are those that have not responded chased up? Because we've got 20 responses that are overdue.
The follow-up report is the next report after this, so we'll get onto that.
Because this is such a long report, normally they won't be this long. It's just been obviously a larger time span between the last committee. So what we will get is a progress report, follow-up report, and then periodically there'll be things like the charter, the annual plan. So that's I think probably the best way to approach it. So just clarity.
On page 55, which I'm trying to find at the moment, I couldn't make sense of it because there seemed to be something missing on the first line.
So that carries forward from page 54. So you can see
it says the updated document should also, and then the next word is
sorry, I can see, sorry. Yeah, apologies, that's a typo. That bit we can get that corrected to ensure that's complete.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Right,
on page 61, I wasn't sure what relief duty and main duty meant. Could you give an explanation of that, please?
So we'll come on to that one in the next set again. So we're up to page 59. We'll come on to those ones.
Okay, right. Ready?
Perfect. Thank you. So we're now up to page 60 in your packs. So this is a summary of the housing tenancy sustainment report, where we provided reasonable assurance. There was 2 medium findings raised within this report. There was also 6 lows. I'll focus on the 2 mediums because they're the areas we see as higher risk areas, low housekeeping items. So the first of the 2 medium findings relates to the completion of the temporary accommodation inspection sheets. So this is a process that's followed before any placement is made to ensure that there's evidence that the relevant checks around the safety of the property, fire safety, gas, electrics, all those areas you'd expect have been performed. Across the sample of 5 placements that were tested, 4 didn't have that sheet completed. That's not to say those checks weren't performed, it's that the documentation and administration did not reflect that. And that was put down to a lack of resource capacity issue within the team to support that process. As you can see from the management response, it's been noted, and that's something they're looking to include in the environmental health team going forward. The other medium finding, which is finding 6, again relates to another assessment form, is the documentation of that process, the rough sleeper outreach risk assessment form. So again, across our sample, there was one individual where this hadn't been completed to demonstrate that process had been conducted, that the assessment had taken place in advance of that individual obviously presenting to the council. To answer the question, preempting your question, Councillor, in terms of the main relief and main duty and relief duty. So in my understanding, and apologies if I've not got this fully correct per the legislation, but the main duty is the council's core statutory duty to support individuals presenting to it in terms of providing housing, accommodation on a temporary basis. I believe, may be corrected on this, the relief duty is slightly different, that in the sense it's not the statutory, it's a supporting duty alongside it. So that's my understanding of it. Having said that, I'm not an expert in that complete area, so I may have got those definitions slightly wrong. The next report is our bank and cash reconciliation audit report. So we've provided reasonable assurance with 1 medium and 3 low findings. So this review was a review of the processes in place by the council to reconcile income in both cash form and electronic payment forms to its general ledger, to its bank account. And that includes third-party collection points like pay zones, post office collections and things like that. So that is where the 1 medium finding was raised within this review. And that relates to the fact there's no agreements in place with these third-party providers, which is particularly pertinent around data security and the confidentiality of those points, which we think would be prudent to have in place. And then finally, which is on Appendix 3 of the report and on page 74 of your packs, is the network and infrastructure management report. So you'll notice this one is in a slightly different template. So before I go into the report, I'll just explain that. Whilst BDO are the outsourced internal audit providers, the council has an existing arrangement for IT audit, which I believe is contracted up to the end of March this year. So this review and IT reviews aren't conducted by ourselves, they're provided by your existing provider who's in place. So whilst we've included it in the pack, because it's not a BDO output, it would be wrong for us to put it in our template. So I'll give a brief summary, but there is a caveat here to say we didn't do the piece of work and that was done by somebody else. So this review provided reasonable assurance again, with 2 medium findings and 1 low finding. So the first of the 2 medium findings relates to a gap in the management service agreement. So the manual specifies the end date as the 22nd of May 2025. We haven't seen, or the auditor hadn't seen, an updated version of that. Obviously, it expired 7 months ago from this date. And then secondly, around the monthly service review meetings with CISLM, these hadn't taken place since October 2024, albeit we can see from the management responses these have been reinstated, and essentially contract management, ongoing monitoring meetings. I'll pause there and again invite any questions on any of those 3 reports. Again, with the caveat on the 3rd one, that was not our piece of work, so I may, again, and apologies, invite you to support any answers to those.
Any questions? Councillor,
As before, I'm sort of focusing on areas of concern and issues that are sort of slightly worrying. And this one is on page, oh gosh, I've lost the page now. But it's where it says that there was a failure for the hardware. Sorry, I've completely lost it now. Bear with me, Chair. I'll come back to it.
Is it on page, is it page 76, that table? faulty failed.
Yes, yes. 76. I'll get there eventually.
So that table covers the key risks tested as part of the review. So you can see, and this is similar to the review reports you would have had before in that template. These are the 4 key risks that were covered in that review, and then there's a substantial, reasonable, or limited opinion given against those controls. So you can see for that one, linking, I think, probably to the findings, that is the risk where a limited opinion was given for that specific point. Normally, again, I can't specifically comment on this one because it's not a piece of work that we completed. Normally that links to the fact that the median findings will relate to that specific risk that was tested.
I'm presuming that the faulty failed hardware issues as they arise will be fixed fairly quickly. I'm assuming perhaps Anthony can.
All I'd say is I think what the expectation, you're correct, is that if there is a fault or a failed hardware, it would be fixed on a timely basis. I think what the audit has found is that may well be happening, but there are 2 medium recommendations in that area that are reflective of trying to achieve that. So it may be that that's being done on a goodwill basis at the moment because the agreement's expired. What audit is saying is you need to get that agreement in place, and you need to have the contract management meetings with the company to ensure that does happen. Goodwill might be fine in the short term, but it may not be a sustainable approach.
No, that's reassuring anyway. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
Meeting on the 25th of November of 2025 to discuss temporary accommodations inspections. Do we have any idea what the outcome was? Or what the plan created?
So again, that's probably the same answer to the one on business continuity plan. So we will follow up on those as our recommendations. So that is in the management response. So we raise the finding and the recommendation. That's the management opportunity to say, this is what we're going to do essentially. So as part of our follow up, we will follow up on that, and that will come to a future committee.
Got one on page 71, when I can find where page 71 is. Yes, you've got a no assurance out on one of the items. What's been done about that?
So we've not in our reports given no assurance in any. So this on page 71, that's our opinion significance definition.
Right.
So for each report where I mentioned before, you've got the 2 opinions. They range from substantial, moderate, limited, or no. So where we're given a no assurance, and they are very, very rare, we're essentially saying we can't take any assurance that there are any controls that support the effective management of that specific area. So we haven't raised any no assurance opinions in this report. That's just a definition scale for you to reflect on and see where that would be applicable.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions in relation to overdues. Page 84, I've got 6 that are shown as overdue.
Sorry, that's the following report. We'll come on to that one. That's the next follow-up report.
Let's stop jumping.
The photos which are shown, are we in appendix 2? We're in appendix 2, aren't we? At the moment?
2, which is the progress report.
Right. It's directly below where I've written appendix 2, so I think it's in the right section. Just a query in relation to the photos that appear in reports. Are they our people? If they're not our people, what they're doing there?
No, so these are
just models.
Correct, yeah. So these are standard
point images. We're doing a report about Lichfield District Council. I just think it should reflect Lichfield District Council, not a generic set of photos.
Yeah, no, in terms of imagery, we've got a selection of photos within our database. So we have standard kind of video template photos. We can work with management to change templates where necessary, but they're just
I
standard.
personally don't like them then. Okay, if that's how you do it.
To model, councillor Chetton.
No, not offering to model, but I think if we've got employees and doing jobs, represent them in their own reports.
Got one.
They might not want. No, they might not want to. I get that.
Thought, yes.
If I may, Chair, I think that this is part of the difference where we're now using outsourced internal auditors. This is a BDO document, not a Lichfield District Council document. Although it is prepared for Lichfield District Council, in the same way as you wouldn't expect assets to use Lichfield District Council intellectual assets, because it's an assets report. This is a BDO report. I guess further down in the next report, you have got Lichfield District Council photographs, because that is a Lichfield District Council paper at Appendix 2, the internal audit report.
Right.
So that would be my understanding, and I think the time required for BDO to obtain, get permission for, and use our intellectual property is probably
Okay.
not really worth it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, then we'll go on to the final report, which is the follow-up report. I'll bring Faye in. That's our last report of the session.
The follow-up report is we're following up on any recommendations from previous reports that we've offered. And we do this regularly to make sure there's the most value and ensure that they're being done on time. So before the November committee, we did the follow-up report. We then updated it in the interim to make sure that we could see if there was any differences for this committee. Previously, before we became the outsourced internal auditors, there was several hundred recommendations that were still outstanding, and this has been significantly decreased in the last few months. Notably, when we're going to present this to you in November, 63% of recommendations were complete. There's now 70 in only a couple of months. So those first few pages of the report, those tables will summarise the recommendations of outstanding audits and when they were made. So if there's a specific audit that you want to refer to see if the recommendations have been followed up, you'll be able to see there whether they fall in complete, in progress, overdue or not due. So if I quickly touch on a couple of the audits that you mentioned during this meeting in questions, for example, on page 86, business continuity, it looks as though those recommendations weren't completed as of this being reviewed in December. And housing tenancy that you mentioned, that one wasn't due yet, so that hasn't been followed up. And then on an overall basis, there are currently 35 recommendations outstanding, with 4 still from 2023-24. So we have been working closely with leadership team to reduce this backlog, and we intended in November to appeal that all recommendations were addressed in a timely manner. Was there any questions?
Any questions, folks? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, overdue follow-ups is an issue we've been tackling for since I joined the committee. We went through an exercise with Rebecca, and we called in a number of managers to speak to the overdue recommendations, and we did get a lot of overdues resolved. The number dropped right down, if I remember, to the 80s, and may have spiked back up again since, as we've done further or internal audits. Given that you do internal audits for other authorities, where's your feeling into? I'm not asking for specifics. Where's your feeling in terms of a benchmark? Is this about normal?
So the honest answer is it varies. So we operate across public sector, so not just local government, but also NHS. I can give a more broader perspective. Some authorities take the approach of, and I'm not saying this is the right way to go, is requesting where there are overdue recommendations, calling that responsible officer to the committee to explain it. That's probably the one end of the spectrum you could take, and that can be effective and obviously holds individuals to account on getting those implemented. Other committees take a different style, which is the leadership team lead on all of those recommendations. So a senior exec or an exec member will be either the responsible individual or will oversee within their area recommendations that are due for implementation, obviously with individual staff then responsible for acting those. I guess I gave the broad position on follow-up. Some councils we have fewer than 10 outstanding, with very, very few falling overdue. Others, we have a very, very similar position where it can be up to 100 that are outstanding, and we've done considerable work with those authorities to ensure that our approach supports an effective follow-up process, and that can often be involving members of the leadership team, sometimes up to the CEO. So we take a flexible approach on what works best essentially at each authority, but obviously as part of our process we'll be working with Fancy and the leadership team to see what practically works best to get those overdue recommendations to as low as possible. But I think it's probably worth noting what Faye said around is a better position and they are decreasing the overdue. So hopefully it continues on that trend and it organically happens.
I can just add to that, the complete column is everything that was complete since the last time this was done. So you can see that there's almost 50 there. So if you're ever looking for an idea of how many has been done since last time, that's a good idea to see whether it's working in a good direction or not.
If I may, Chair, my recollection, obviously the ones that you pick out are the 17, 18, 18, 19 ones. As my recollection is those were the first ones we asked the manager to come in and speak to, and there was a genuine reason as to why they should still be there, and we were working towards it. So I think we as a committee the last time we met were fairly comfortable with where we were, and we appreciate your input. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
That's all from us.
Lovely. Thank you both very much indeed. Sorry,
Chair, if I may, before we finish, just an overall question. It is fairly good practice, is my understanding, for internal auditors to have opportunities on a regular basis to meet with the chair of the committee to have conversations outside of without having officers there, so that they can have direct conversation. Is that something that you do? Is that something you've had chance to implement with the chair yet?
So to answer this separately, so part one being yes, that is something we do as a process. Again, we work with each organisation to see what works best for them. Some organisations I'll attend a full committee meeting without management there once a year. 15-20 minutes, have that open conversation. Others prefer actually just to do it via the chair of the conduit. So we have pre-audit committee meetings, which includes management, but we'd also be open to what you described of a once a quarter, once every half year, one-to-one conversation, and we'll look to set that, Chair.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Indeed, we only had a conversation, the three of us, yesterday, so it's something we're doing, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Checkland.
Yeah, going back to my question on page 69, just before we'll finish up, it mentions that your target is to complete 90% of audits. Surely the target should be 100% of audits. Is that not the aim? Completion audit plan. Our target is to complete 90% of audits. Surely we should have a target of 100%.
Correct. So 100% of the plan will be completed. So refers to 90% of the audit delivery by the 31st of March. So naturally, because of timescales, the annual report, that our end goal summarises the year and our overall aim for the year, will be presented in the first committee following the end of March. Ultimately, the aim is to have all of the field work done by the end of March. Occasionally, there is some slippage within that. Naturally, this year has been quite a change in the service. in terms of obviously Rebecca departing and us coming as the outsource. So there may be some that fall into that period after. But yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. We do typically deliver on 100%, which is the standard.
Which I sort of would expect, rather than set yourself a target that.
Yeah, no, that's right. But in terms of 90%, so 90% is to have 90% of all field work delivered by the 31st of March. The whole plan will be completed to the annual report date, but some of that might fall into April.
My last question was in relation to the customer satisfaction replies. 12 issued and you had 5 replies. That doesn't sound like a very good uptake or anything to monitor anything with.
So on the finalisation of each report, we have a survey which we issue, and previously, before we became the providers, the in-source team had the same or a very similar sort of survey that was issued. Obviously, we can't mandate individuals complete that survey. We do ask for that feedback. So I think it's really valuable to help us evolve and adapt the service. Again, similar to the previous situation, we can use internal escalation points to help build up the uptake. If I'm being brutally honest, 50, or in this case, we're looking at just below 50%, is probably in line with what we typically get other authorities. But in my ideal world, I want to get to 80, 90, 100%, because that feedback really does help us evolve the service.
So these are the managers that you're auditing, who are there to help and cooperate with you. You have to feedback on their level of cooperation. Don't bother replying. I get that.
So they feed back during the field work of the audit. They provide us all the evidence they need. The questionnaire at the end is a review of how well they think we've done as internal auditors, which they see as an optional questionnaire. They don't have to complete it. And therefore, with time pressures and everything, quite often that does get me.
It's a point we can take forward, Anthony, in terms of how we.
Only from the point of view that if your internal auditors aren't being audited by the person they're auditing, seems a bit illogical.
I think, to be fair, it comes quite quickly after the audit's been completed, and let's just say the outcome of the audit and the recommendations may influence some people in terms of whether they see it as a priority. But Max is right that unless that feedback's provided, then you can't influence the approach that's taken and maybe learn lessons from it.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. So, John, you wanted a quick one?
Yeah, the recommendations follow-up. In several instances, it says under internal audit comments, internal audit undertakes a sample test of recommendations management advice has implemented. This recommendation was not sample tested. However, the recommendation was still removed from follow-up. Was there any reason why they weren't sample tested?
This is based on the Litchfield previous approach to follow up for recommendations. So we've taken on your methodology to follow up. Previously under Rebecca, she took a sample test approach to recommendations that not all of them would require evidence to see if they were implemented, whereas usually at each recommendation we would ask for the evidence as if it was the original audit to see that that has been completed. So that approach has been followed through to us doing the follow-up for recommendations. On an ongoing basis, for BDO's perspective, we follow up on every single high and medium recommendation. So going forward, there won't be any sample testing. All high and medium recommendations are reviewed with evidence.
And Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, sorry, to go back to Councillor Checkland's point, the customer satisfaction questionnaire, that strikes me as the meetings between yourselves and audit chair would be an example for an opportunity, if you are not receiving as many as you would like, for you to mention that to the chair and for the chair to bring that up with management and leadership to apply some pressure.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Anything more? In that case, thank you both very much indeed. Good to meet with you. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, I believe we have the work programme. Well,
We've got something else.
I do apologise.
I believe we've got the outcome of the audit committee skills and knowledge assessment.
Oh, we have, yes, we have. Right, I jumped ahead, I do apologise, yes.
So, you on.
Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, in view of the comments that have just been made about the failure by officers to respond to questionnaires, I think it's pretty miserable in 3.4 that only 75% of the members of this committee responded to the skills audit. And that, in a sense, it's a light on the issues around member engagement and member attendance and so on. And I just wonder how we could increase that sort of level of engagement, whether if as the chair to speak to those members individually, you know, but there are only 8 of us, for goodness sake, you know, it isn't a huge position for us to complete those skills audits.
Robert, sorry, did you want to say something, Jamie? You were,
No, I just wondered if there's
you were just looking
a
at
list there to say who's done it, is there? I mean, I know.
Well, I think probably to start with, certainly I'm very happy to have a word with those members who didn't respond. I will inquire from Will who it wasn't later on, and we'll take it from there. But it's like the skills audit we do with all the councillors. They're very, very poor, many of them responding to it. We've done audits and that training needs and that in the past, and you get about 40 or 50% respond. And it doesn't matter what you do to them, you cannot get them to do, you know, what this should be for them, for their benefit. It's for their benefit. And
we've sort of, over the period that we've had training, for the last several years, you know, it's been reinforced to members of the committee how important the audit committee is in terms of the health of the organisation generally. And if nothing else, then audit committee members ought to, if you like, live up to the expectations of what audit committee is about. So, you know, I think it's, I just want to make the statement. I hope I did. I'm sure I did. But, you know, it's pretty miserable that only 75% of the committee responded.
yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I do training for a living, so I know how beneficial it is when you do these sort of things. And yeah, you know, pulling teeth doesn't come into it with some of them, but we'll give it another go. Right, over to you, Will.
I'd like to take credit for writing this report, but actually it's Anthony.
Thank you, Anthony.
I can get you the details of that. To speak.
You wouldn't mind, please, and I will have a word or two. So what was the results of the?
I say it was Anthony that read it.
Oh, sorry, Anthony's going to do that. Sorry.
So all I was going to say, Chair, was that so we've the core skills and the core areas of knowledge were assessed by each member against the SIPFA questionnaire. And in 3.5, you can see the average scores for each of the areas of the SIPFA guide. Core areas, it's clear treasury management was one area that members felt they needed more training on. And then I've put the amber coloured ones, so risk management, external audit, financial reporting, governance were other areas. And then on the core skills, meeting management skills was another red area. So all we've done at 3.6 is say, well, we've looked at those areas where members have indicated lower scores. We'll recommend that the training programme will focus on those areas, but equally 3.7 we've thrown it open to the committee to identify any other areas they think they would help them in their role to do have further training. So I mean, that's all I wanted to say, and leave it for the committee then to debate.
Thank you very much. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I think this has got to be a discussion with group leaders as well. It's group leaders who appoint members of committees at full council, at annual council. And group leaders all need to be aware that they need to have audit committee members who are going to be engaged and ask questions and are curious and so on. So, you know, this really needs to be shared with group leaders.
Does. Yes, indeed. Well, we've engaged with yourself, which is good. So this leaves the other two group leaders to have this word with. So thank you.
Do you want me to Do you want me to share the report with you so that you can share that with the group leaders?
Please, if you wouldn't mind, that'd be good. Yes, thank you. Yes, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I just wonder, given that we're missing 25% of the committee from this report, absolutely great if you could reach out to those committee members who failed for whatever reason. If by any chance we do get their responses within a reasonable period of time, whether we can fold that into these results and have that come back to committee again so that we could see the I mean, I don't know, for example, is it new members who failed to fill it in and therefore everything's actually should be a little bit lower than we see it, because I'm pleased to see the results as high as they were. They felt a bit high to me. If I'm just using myself as a basis, and I've spent a year as committee chair with all sorts of additional learnings outside of the committee and outside of the council, and I still probably wouldn't have answered it this highly on some of these questions. And I'm not saying I'm a Superman or worthy of any additional extra praise than anybody else. It just I don't know whether there's an element of you don't know what you don't know, and therefore maybe yeah, it felt a little just I couldn't put my finger on it. Just
yourself.
Yeah, yeah. But I wonder whether we could perhaps attempt to get those two extra sets of data in, and if we do, see what it looks like after that.
Certainly speak with that. I would imagine that probably one of them is Councillor Warfield, who, as we know, is not good enough to consider at the moment. But yeah, no, all good points. Thank you. And yes, if you let me have the information, I'll move this forward ASAP. Anything else?
The officers can measure us. Perhaps the officers can measure us.
More objective.
Sorry, that's more objective.
Yeah, I was just going to say to you, I've always thought external audit should have a role because they're independent, objective, but they sit on audit committees. Yeah. But I don't think it does fall in their remit, and it probably does put them in a difficult position.
Yeah, and it would put officers in a difficult position as well. I understand that, but members are in a difficult position anyway, assessing themselves. And Councillor Taylor's point about sort of under-reporting, if you like, that's tends to be the inclination that we're not perhaps as good as some of us think we are.
Yes,
the other point I should have made is that to help members and assist, we have appointed the independent member, so that should bring additional skills to the committee. It may help the committee in certain areas in terms of the questions they're able to ask, because as I understand it, depending on how good the independent member is, and I believe this guy, he can benefit other members of the committee.
Good.
Yes.
I was just concerned Councillor Checkland's suggestion was one step away from us sitting exams, and as much as I love this committee, I'm not going through an exam for it.
Lower percentage return.
Yes, John.
I have to say I had difficulty actually getting it to transfer back. I kept filling it in, and when I put it to send back to it went blank. It's only about the fourth attempt that I actually managed to get it to actually transmit properly. So if other people had the same problem, they may have given up earlier.
I certainly had problems with it in that direction. In the end, I just completed it and actually sent photographs in of the answers were.
Yeah. So that might be why we had a low response. It just wouldn't come back to people.
But I will certainly do as I've said. I will speak to the two members who made 100%, and we'll take it from there. Very good. Anything else with that? No, right. Sorry?
There's a training program outlined 3.6.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to approve. Do you want to have a vote on that?
We do need to approve it and have a vote on it.
I'll propose it.
Thank you so much, councillor Taylor. Seconder, please. Councillor Woodward, second. All in favour? Unanimous. Good. Right. So what are we up to now then? And number 9. So it's been a long day. I was up at 5 this morning in Southampton. Had to come back. It's been a long day. Yeah, regulation of investigatory powers, policy and monitoring.
To be chair.
It's you, indeed. Well, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. So, as members may be aware, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act sets out the legal framework for local authorities when they're carrying out directed surveillance or using covert human intelligence sources, the precise definition of which is given in the report. It ensures that any such activity is necessary, proportionate and properly authorised. The report also confirms that the council hasn't used any RIPA powers during 2024 or 25, and in fact hasn't done so in the recent past. And the attached policy remains unchanged, and it's next due to be reviewed in 26-27 in 12 months' time, unless legislation requires an earlier amendment. If members are wondering why the policy is presented every 12 months when we don't usually carry out surveillance, it's because the Home Office Code of Practice requires us to review the policy on an annual basis and report to elected members. And this is monitored by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner, who contacts me annually to make sure that we've done this. So that's why it's brought every 12 months for this committee's attention, and the committee's asked to consider the monitoring report, which is a nil return, review the policy to confirm that the governance arrangements, if we were to use it, remain robust. And I'm happy, Chair, to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark.
Move the recommendations.
Right, Paul.
Yeah, sorry. So one really tiny point. The only highlighted change in the report is to be wrong.
Oh, gosh.
Surely the next review date is November 26.
Sorry, can you?
Page 149 of the report. First page after the
review box on there. Yeah. Yeah, that's the review that is taking place was due to have been in November 2025. With the
okay, so this is the November 25.
That review, yeah, and it will then be altered to 2026.
Very much.
Right, second.
All in favour? Yep. Unanimous. Right, item 10. Auditor's annual report for Lichfield District Council 24-25.
This is Ola.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for not being there in person. We noted significant disruption in train today and due to weather condition. I prefer face-to-face interaction. I'll make sure next time we are there in person. The report today is covering the audit annual report for the year end 31st March 2025, which is covered council arrangement in place for value for money. The same report would have been provided in this committee for 31st March 2024, and I believe it would have been presented by Helen or Laura last year. Just one change in the deadlines for the report. National Audit Office has introduced a deadline for issuing the report to the council by 30 November each year. The idea behind treating the report deadline is to ensure the commentary share while it's still adding value for the local authority. If I can read down within the report, the first part of the report gives headline summary of the areas we are responsible for as the external auditors of the council, including statutory powers. I'm happy to share that there is none of the statutory powers we have utilized during the year. If there was something, we would have already came to the audit committee. The report is also mentioning that we anticipate to issue an unqualified opinion on the financial statement. This is now history, as we have managed to sign off the audit on the 2nd of December. The reason why we ended up signing on the 2nd of December was the delays we experienced with our Staffordshire County Council Pension Fund auditors. This is a different audit firm that does the audit, and we were waiting for them to provide us with a letter. I think it's worth mentioning this is something that was outside of our control, and also the Litchfield finance team. I think it's worth mentioning that the finance team have been really helpful this year for us to get down the line for signing off on the audit. And it was the first client we have signed off in our local government audit for 2025. And on top of that, it was the first time the council has created a group account, which required significant amount of time to be spent on both the client side and also on the auditor side. The rest of the report, I'll presume that it has been read, but it's covering the financial sustainability of the council, governance, and improve economic efficiency and effectiveness. I think members should note that we didn't identify any significant weakness in the council arrangement. I think from the report that I've already written for my portfolio of clients, this is probably one of the 2 clients where we didn't have any significant weakness. We noted that managers have arrangement in place to ensure financial resilience, strong governance, and the use of resources in economical, efficient, and effective manner. I think the key point to take away or to highlight on reading Litchfield financial report was the consideration of the optimistic and pessimistic modeling for medium-term financial strategy, which consider potential future scenarios. I haven't seen that in any of my other audits, which was something that I really enjoy reading through. We, however, raised some other recommendations under governance in relation to attendance of the audit committee. We understand the sensitivity nature of this recommendation. The member should note that this is not raising a significant issue, otherwise it would have been a significant weakness. It's more of a best practice which highlights good attendance, will ensure strong engagement by committee members. We have a detailed paragraph within page 182 of the PEC where we detail audit committee around the attendance, the appointment of the independent member. And we also noted, I think it was mentioned earlier, we noted the annual self-assessment of the committee effectiveness was 38% in the year under audit, which is from 1 April 2024 to 31st March 2025. And I can hear from the discussion here, this has been moved now to 75%, which is a significant improvement. And our recommendation that we raised, we also observed that there were changes in the attendance. There were significant improvement in attendance of the members post year end. However, we needed to note for the 24-25, which is the year we under audit. We also raised another recommendation in relation to LWTS oversight governance, which we also already aware that this is in progress in terms of getting the oversight governance board. We also had raised a recommendation in last year, and we performed a follow-up this year to ensure that this recommendation has been addressed. We're happy to say that the recommendation has now been closed. I think it is worth mentioning that it was writing up this report, it was one of the reports that didn't give me a lot of headache when I was, it didn't give me any headache when I was driving it, because this presented a strong arrangement in place from our review of report, and also we observed the interaction and scrutiny of this committee. I understand our cover page also is including models, but I can take the commentary to our leadership team, maybe to consider including the pictures of either the council house or, but it's something that I can take away. I think I'm happy to take any questions for any part of the report.
Yes, Councillor Woodward.
The comment really, thank you for being so patient, waiting through all of that committee meeting. But it's interesting to note on page 182 and 185 those recommendations about attendance and engagement, which we've discussed. But when the external auditor also sees that as an issue, we've got to make sure that, you know, all of the members across the council see that as an issue and not leave audit, oh, that's the committee nobody wants to go on. We'll just bung somebody on who's perhaps not got other committee places. I mean, it is incumbent on group leaders to make sure that people on audit committee are up to the job. So thank you for that recommendation.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else? No, in that case, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Short and sweet.
Good to see you. Thank you for your input.
Sits there for 2 hours and then it's so.
Sorry.
Sits there for 2 hours and then that's 5 minutes.
Work programme, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, so work programme, the only changes that have been made that I'm aware of are that the LWMTS risk report is now due to be presented at the March meeting. But beyond that, no other changes to the programme. Anthony?
I'm just going to say, do we need to pick up the point about coming back with the audit skills if the other two members? So that probably needs adding to the programme, just to remind me for nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we can't physically assign it to a particular date until we get the responses, but yeah, we can put it in the minutes.
Yes. Look for a swift response from the. That's it then. Thank you all very much indeed for your attendance. Your questions, which have been searching and interesting. Thank you. Thank you to all the officers who attended and also attended, and to those who attended via the internet. So we wish you a pleasant evening and thank you and good night.
Thank you. Bye.